Hello and good evening. I am Linda. I've realized that Phoenix, you don't ever introduce yourself. I'm Linda of Mystical Blue Academy. You always have your camera off when we jump on.
Sorry.
So, Phoenix.
I'm Phoenix. Welcome to the Academy.
And we are here tonight with Trena of Laughing Goddess 888. And Peter, who is joining for this class tonight. I'm not going to pronounce your last name.
Rosencrantz.
There we go. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Trena, let Trena talk about the class tonight and anything else you want to add before we get started. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and turn it over right to you.
Great. Most of you, in fact, I think everybody has been on with me before. So I don't really need to go into the healing journey. You've heard brand new life, but I do often bring up in that I manifested a partner when I decided I wanted to live. Meet partner. This is the man I manifested into my life. And it's because you need someone to be your mirror. Now, for not everyone, it's not always a romantic relationship. Your mirror can be a child, your parents, a really close friend. In fact, one of the things that I'll probably hit earlier in this is how it doesn't have to be a romantic partnership. One of the key pillars of this type of dynamic is intimacy. And in our society, we often take intimacy to mean, like sexual relations. Intimacy is being able to be vulnerable to one other person. If you're intimate with someone, you can be your authentic self. And that's the part that is needed. But that can be done with, hetero life mates too. So there are lots of options for that. Now, this is for our Divine Union class, which we share because we had our awakening jointly. It was the night that I speak about when I started channeling, because that was when our paradigm shifted to say, holy crap, it's real. And there really is stuff out there that we can't understand, we can understand, but we don't currently understand, that we would call magic. And being able to have that shift as something that we experience together really allowed us to bond and then awaken in a way that we were doing so in tandem. So we got to see a lot of the mechanics of how it works, including some communication things that come up for a lot of people. As we talk to other couples, there are themes that we see over and over again. It's why I go so much into codependency, because Divine Feminine is very prone to codependency. One of the things I think I should probably start with, though, is I often use the term Divine Feminine, Divine Masculine. It has nothing to do with the body, though, because although you will more often see Divine Feminine in feminine bodies, I'm not even sure whether that is purely because of spirit or because our society helps structure those that are born assigned female at birth to act a certain way. Some of them, I believe, are attached to those societal shadows, and other parts are genuine with the intuitive side of the energy. We tend to refer to Divine Feminine as the intuitive. And when I'm speaking as cleanly and accurately as possible, I probably wouldn't even say Divine Feminine. I would use intuitive. And for Divine Masculine, we say integrator. Now, the intuitive, which I'll explain because that's my side and I live it, is we feel. But our shadow for that is we feel hard and we feel like we give everything because we just want harmony. Now, one thing we have realized is that both the integrator and the intuitive have the same challenges, but we have them from different sides of the challenge. And for me, as the intuitive, I struggle a lot to explain how I got to realize something because I didn't follow it linearly like the integrator does. My strengths are in flow, in knowing what feels right, in feeling other people's emotions, but it comes with it feeling other people's emotions and then learning how to deal with that. The integrator, I should probably let you do that unless you would like me to.
You can take a stab at it.
I'll take a stab at the integrator's strengths. They work in our linear time, which is what we are existing in. They are the masters at figuring out what we need to do. And then as you get into a bigger cosmic scale of understanding this, understanding the mechanics that we need to make things like manifestation happen. Because we can intuitively feel, all right, this one feels right, and we flow. But we'll be at a place where we're like, we know where we want to go, but I'm not feeling what's going to be the most effective. Because until we have really cleared and come into full alignment with it, the path is not always clear to the intuitive. It is to the integrator if it involves anything that's dealing with our existence and our world. Also,
Anything with
Yeah.
a clear-cut goal as well.
yeah, I can feel which way to go, but he's the one who has to tell me how to get there, because I don't know the best plans, the way to make it work.
I find the path.
Yeah, he finds, and how to make it efficient, but also so I can understand when we look back to reflect and to see how we want to change and grow and everything else. Now, again, this isn't ruminating on the past, because that's more often what we end up doing is looking back at our past and then picking ourselves apart and beating ourselves up for not doing it differently. But what the integrator is a master at is how to look at that and say, how will I do it better? And it is a very, very important skill, as well as helping me understand myself as a mirror, especially because as a mirror, we see the parts that we don't want to look at. And that is something I will bring up about divine union, which, to define divine union, are two people following the ascension path together. I realize I probably should start with what it is. And what's very vital about that is it is not, we are this super special couple, because that puts in codependency. It isn't the couple. Now, we've started that way, mind you. I started with we are a twin flame and our souls have been, and that's true because the story's written backwards. And when you find the person that you make the journey with, from that, your whole story then was written to be together. But only because that is what we chose as we are developing into our own sovereign, autonomous beings. We are each healing ourselves so that we can walk together. Because if one divine being is great, two that are working for a common goal and whose path and mission is in alignment is so much more powerful.
Look out.
Right. And the thing is, as I said, it's there for everyone. So it's not that divine union is this incredibly rare thing, not once people learn how to heal themselves. Because part of what we do is not only working with, partners that are trying to understand each other and where their miscommunications are, of which there can be many, because coming from integrator to intuitive and back again is really easy to misunderstand each other. But once you heal yourself, you're not going to draw in partners that are wounded and broken and not broken, that sounds horrible, but they'll appear so to you and likely even feel so themselves, because they're there to show you what you need to heal. Now, your divine partner is your mirror, which triggers this running chasing mechanism. The chaser is very often the one who is the most codependent, because
At the moment.
And that
And
you
that
can
will
change
shift
which
back
is
and
which,
forth.
especially as different one is further in their healing than the other. The chaser needs to be validated. Tell me you heard me. Tell me you understand me. Very often we'll get much more emotional when there's an issue, because your self-worth is wrapped upon your partner agreeing with you, understanding you, making you feel that the love you're putting out is being received. Funny enough, though, that's not what the runner is running from. When it's the runner doesn't run from being chased. The runner runs because of the reflection in the mirror. because you are each other's mirror. You see in the other what you don't like about yourself. If say a guy is very angry and his mirror is very, timid and flinchy and everything else, every time she flinches, although that's her shadow to clear and heal as well for why she has that reaction, it also makes him look at his anger. And as a mirror, a lot of people, you run from having to look at the parts of yourself that you're not ready to see yet. And it's why many of these couples have very on again, off again, especially until they understand how healing works and how the mirror process works. When we have a disagreement, no matter how upset I am, even after a few minutes, maybe, I have reached the point now where I always start going, what is it in me that he's showing me that is making this happen? Because
And I do the same. What is it about this situation that has me so worked up?
Yeah. And that
Because
goes,
the answer is always here. It's never there.
Now, there are, in the early part of this path, a lot of shadows that come up. One of the best things that we've learned in our process, and this is hard because I was a chaser and I wanted harmony. If I could feel, and as an empath, I could feel that he was upset, first of all, I would turn it inward. Oh my God, what did I do? Why is he mad at me? What I learned, and this is very important during this, is to separate into different areas of the house or take a bath, even like if you're in a small place, but take some time to work through how you feel about that, how you really feel, and look at yourself to take the other person out of it and then come back together and discuss it. Because in the heat of the, emotions, you can get some of the great things out, but you'll know when you hit a wall and you need to take the time apart in order to be able to figure out where you really are, to clearly express boundaries, which, as we discussed in the boundary class, is very difficult to do in the middle of strong emotions. It's when you're likely to throw the baby out with the bathwater and overreach and make ultimatums that you really aren't going to follow through with and things like that. But that's a very common reaction when you're all agitated up with the energy of there being a disagreement. We have realized that we will use the same exact words and not understand each other because everybody's perception is different. And this is one of the future classes I'm doing is perception and projection. But the example I like to use actually involves the church. If you were raised in a community where your whole neighborhood got together for all the church events and everybody had a great time and there was the carnival and you just think of the church.
You have happy memories associated with it.
If the church in your mind equals community, you will feel positive when someone might mention a priest. But if you were raised with religious trauma, you're going to have a very different reaction. And we have found many things in our communication where we would instantly disagree. And the more we sorted through it, we realized we just saw certain words differently. They had different meaning to us. Like I tend to use but as an interjection when I'm speaking to people. Now, to me, it was always but also is how I mean it. He always took it that I was arguing with him, even when I was agreeing with his part and then throwing additional in. And it really chafed him. But
It
it's
took
because
us a long time
to figure that one.
First figure that out, and then
right.
I had to
realize that's
retrain myself, right? That's what we're always doing.
Yep.
Adapting by retraining our belief system always into a more limitless state than it was before, a larger state than it was before.
And it all comes down to communication, but not just the communication that comes out of your mouth. Honesty is a huge part of it. We can't even lie to each other anymore because it eats us up. And I mean, how many times, no matter how much you love somebody in my pre-awakening life, Were there all the little white lies because you didn't want to upset someone or make them unhappy and all of these things? But in this path, honesty becomes so important.
You
Not because
can,
you don't want to do anything else, because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel in
and
alignment.
because you will never have the intimacy that you so
Yeah.
desperately desire without complete honesty.
Which, believe me, has led to some very uncomfortable conversations.
Absolutely. We've had to
Yeah.
discuss all the stuff that most couples never talk about.
Right.
And
Like
we've
ownership, which I
done it
yeah.
bravely, and I think,
Yeah, I think so too.
and the results of facing all of that are staggering. We have so little friction between us in the way that we interact most of the time.
And if something comes up, we know that it's one of our shadows.
Well,
Yeah.
we know how we each have, by developing together, developed this toolkit that we each use separately and then also together to hash out,
Right.
differences.
Like just
But
yesterday was a huge one.
Go ahead if you want to tell that. Sure.
Yesterday, what came up was that he wasn't feeling that I appreciated divine male. Now, as you go through some of these things, you'll realize that sometimes you're facing shadows that aren't just yours. And in this case, it was one of all of divine feminine. So what happened is he was insisting that he wasn't being appreciated. And all I knew is I was pushing out as much love, light, appreciation, gratitude as I could. So when he was telling me I don't appreciate him, I was very wounded, going, what else can I do? And this is one of the shadows of divine feminine, is that we feel we're putting out as much, love, as much energy as we have. The thing is we're not doing it in the way that they can clearly receive it. And he didn't know how to tell me what it is he needed. But because we have worked through our toolkit, I was able to say multiple times, tell me what you want me to do. Like, what is it that you need to feel appreciated? And when it finally came down to it, it was because I still have a shadow about men not being safe, about men being, and this is where it's a divine feminine shadow. We are raised that we are prey that needs to protect ourselves from men who are the predators. Now, I don't think of him that way at all, but it comes out whenever he gets upset with me, whenever there's any bit of, he might be mad, I defend. Any type of advice, I took his criticism and I defend, which makes him feel like I don't appreciate his gifts because I saw him as the bad guy when he steps into even just giving advice. Now, not as bad as it was when we first got together, because I had a very strong mechanism where even he'd say this would be great with garlic. And I would think, oh no. Now it's more on spiritual things. Why am I not listening to it? But it's because if he said, I think I see where your problem is, I'm taking it as you're telling me I have a problem, and I would go into defense, which made him feel unappreciated. And that was my shadow. But for divine feminine, when we work through those shadows, and this is the biggest gift for me to have gotten, and this was only yesterday, is that as we clear these shadows, others receive the love we're putting out cleanly. Because we are all trying to love each other the best we can. But how frustrating is it for the intuitive to not have it receive the way we're sending it? And it can, as we do our own healing and our own work.
I feel it might be beneficial. Just to briefly, I know that you guys have all by now heard her awakening story and the sicknesses she dealt with and all of that stuff. In my case, I had I had repeated struggles with addiction. Alcohol was my chief bugger, but I dabbled in just about everything at one time or another. And it nearly killed me several times. And by 40 had really brought me to my knees in a way that was one of those sort of vortex moments, you might call it, where things started to gradually get better after I finally started to face, maybe for the first time, to start to really be honest with myself in a way that was leading to actual healing. I have been married and divorced 3 times. Longest relationship I've ever had in my life. And ours has not yet exceeded that, but I know it will, because it's just, everything's so different now. But was 7 years. And I can look back on all of that time now, and I can see with the lens I have now that I was struggling to find somebody that really wanted to live and try with me. And by age 46 or so, I had beaten alcohol for about 6 years. But I had also been single for the last 3 of those 6 years, so maybe 43 to 46. And I was sober. I was way overweight. I was single. I didn't feel like there was much that was all that desirable, at least by our society's standards. And I had worked because of the spiritual work that I had done, all of the information that I had absorbed, I'd reached a decently high, what we call the progressive human state,
Right.
Which is like, right before
Awakening.
somebody,
Yeah.
one of the beings comes and taps you. I made a conscious decision, knowing full well what I was doing, to resume drinking again. I had come to the realization, I thought, that I had never met the level of maturity in another partner, another female, that I thought I was going to need in order to move forward with a relationship. So I was bracing myself for a life of solitude. I had made friends with loneliness, and had long since said goodbye to that in the mirror, and was in many ways content, but obviously not content, because I picked up the bottle again with the distinct and conscious desire this time to take a slow, easy exit for the last time. And then, in a couple of years ago, very, very close to the end of that road, my liver had become so inflamed that bending just a couple inches to the right was enough pinching to send shooting pains through it. And I knew I was just about done. And this time, I probably wasn't going to make it back. And through fate, and our higher selves, I ran across her. She reached out to me, in hindsight, just in the nick of time.
Because in this past,
She was overweight. She was a mess with all these problems. She was married at the time.
Not ideal on paper.
It was, yeah. I mean, it couldn't get more train wreckish, really, from the outside. But we both knew. I knew within a week I was totally fucked because I was like, oh boy. I talked many times when we first met that this decision I had made to hope to never compromise again until I found a partner who was really willing to try with me proved pivotal, because that's what I believe brought her to me. If I hadn't dug in, if I hadn't said, no, I'm never compromising for myself again, I'm either going to die or the right person's going to be there. One of the two is going to happen. Those are the only options.
And we call this his infamous checklist because he did actually have a checklist that he thought a woman would never meet. And yet somehow I did, which then
yes,
he didn't
within
have a
a
choice.
week, I was realizing she had checked all the boxes on my checklist and had added several things to the checklist that I didn't realize I wanted, but now realized and put them on there and checked the box. So I was over the moon. And this, I believe, is the essence of what you're after in divine union. You're after an opportunity to grow and thrive together.
Right.
This is not supposed to be some life sentence for each other. And if it ever becomes that, separate, by
Yes.
God.
Yeah.
Separate. It's
We
run
stay
its
in such
course.
unhappy relationships.
I watched my parents do it. They got divorced after 33 years, but they stayed married for probably the last 15 of them, because I had a sister that was 10 years younger than me, and she was still in high school and all of that. And they did the standard stay together for the kids.
Right.
And that just never, any decision where it's like, I'm just going to continue to keep eating poison for a while longer,
Right.
just to get everybody else happy and healthy. When framed in that way, and you can really see the correlation there, it makes absolutely no sense. But we don't look at it squarely. We don't allow ourselves to look at it squarely, because if we did, we're afraid of what it would show us that it's asking us to do.
It's the oxygen mask in the airplane. How often do we give, the mask and put it on everyone else, but we don't take a breath ourselves? And I think we do that all the time.
So when I first met her, I was talking to her a lot. I had made some successful inroads with a whole food plant-based eating plan by a guy named Dr. Joel Furman. I had, like everybody that struggled with their weight all their life, I had,
tried tons of things.
Yeah, I knew every book, every system, all of that. And hands down, in my opinion, this person is the most balanced, knowledgeable, and most altruistic in his approach to bringing good knowledge about nutrition to the public.
Now, this is where you don't beat yourself up for your past, but my codependency actually is how I was able to stick to the diet in the beginning, because he was so excited about it, had some success, and I wanted to impress him. And so I dove in to learn how to cook and the recipes and things.
And so yes, and that brings up a good point. All these things we self-flagellate for, even codependence, early in our relationship, that was vital to be there. It's like we build these bridges from one end of a chasm, from one end of the canyon to the other. And then once we're on the other side, then that bridge can fall away. The tool that we use to get there then becomes unhealthy, because now somebody has to stay back and man the bridge, and we can't all keep going forward to the next canyon and start building the next bridge. So even things like codependence,
have their place. There was cement early on.
It's step one, right? You can't, so often I can't tell you how time and again I defeated myself on my spiritual path for years before I met her by simply staring at the top of Mount Everest and constantly fixating on that and going, how in the world am I ever going to get that? That's impossible. Instead of just saying, well, I can step over that boulder right there.
Right.
And I know that that's in the general direction of the top of Mount Everest. Stop paying attention to the top of that mountain and start paying attention to what's my next step.
Right. Now, I do want to hit a couple things on the topic to make sure is one, both sides have the same struggles, but we see them differently through our lens. We have realized that the integrator struggles a lot with wanting to fix things. But because they specialize in seeing where the problems are and being able to fix it. But it also means that they want to fix everything, and some things can't be fixed, particularly because then it often causes frustration, which can cause anger at not being able to make you stop crying. Now, the divine,
because of
right.
the universal spiritual principle that we're coming ever more into touch with, you can never do it for another
Yeah.
person, only yourself.
Right. And
They
now,
have to do it for them.
yeah,
I can only do it for me.
the intuitive's same exact struggle of wanting to fix is everybody else's emotions and happiness. We do the same thing, but instead of fixing a particular problem, we're trying to make everyone happy and keep things in harmony. And we both struggle with these, which also means when something comes up, each of us looks at the problem differently because he looks at how it can be solved in real time. And I shouldn't call time real, but it's as close as I got. And we look at how can this work out in a way that everybody is the happiest. But it takes so much of our, because neither of us can control those things for anyone else, only ourselves. And so it's a continuing lesson to learn that. One thing, go ahead.
But this is a great example, by the way, of what we mean when we talk about being able to understand each other, because she would say, see, divine male is always trying to run in and fix things. And we are where we feel we can help.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys, they do the same thing, because when the room is when there's disharmony in the room, divine feminine goes in to talk to them and try to smooth things out.
And when we're
right?
unhealed,
So-
divine feminine, we go in and we try to, I'm sorry, forget, or we manipulate. That's
or
when,
scold or
Right,
whatever. There's
whatever,
lots
yeah.
of different ways that it comes out, but this is a great example of how our desire to help, when colored with ego, becomes a need to fix.
yes,
Right? The pure desire to help is always a desire to add to give something, to help in some way, not to command.
or the savior complex, which I went through early in awakening. When you realize you can heal major things, you suddenly
did
go,
that
I'm
big
going to heal
time.
the world. But you realize that it's not, at least I realized through my shadow work, it wasn't as pure as I thought it was. Because if it was, I wouldn't have wanted to have my name in lights to do it, right? Big, flashy, I'm going to go around and faith heal people, and
Well,
that's not what was actually in alignment with my highest self. Connecting people and helping them learn to heal themselves is, but it took a lot of shadow work to get to that point. And the savior complex is most definitely a really sneaky mechanism of ego, because it's hard to feel bad about what you're planning to do if it's going to help people. But it's still the ego wanting that validation in return for healing. It's not a gift if you're expecting something back. One thing I want to make sure for time that I touch on is there is a lot of thing on twin flames, and I want to address that, because this is what I would have called a twin flame relationship if there wasn't a ton of twin flame stuff out there that I don't feel really represents the journey and scares a lot of people. And the reason it scares people, though, is because you don't know you're a twin flame for sure until you're done. Because very often you're actually what's a karmic partner, where it feels like a twin flame. You have obsessions, you have the codependency early on, but you don't get to the healing part. When one of you starts to grow, it gets worse and worse. The pressure on the spring until the person who's being pressed on, or both, because you're actually pressing on each other, learns to set boundaries, and then you split. And when you split is when the growth happens, if it was a karmic partnership. But as I said, it feels very much like a twin flame relationship, because in a twin flame relationship, it often starts the same way. And I don't want to say a narcissist and someone who's codependent, because it's not always that extreme, but you see it a lot. Someone who's more pro to codependency, or both, and someone who needs the validation. And I mean, not that we all don't to different points, but when you have someone with codependency pouring into someone who has a black hole inside them from where they don't have the self-love, and they're constantly needing to fill it with outside validation, someone who's codependent looks great to them until they realize that they're still empty, because it is self-love that's needed. And that often will happen in karmic partnership, but it often also is how twin flames start, if they can heal together and not run away when they're seeing their mirror, and learn to break the codependency. Because here's one of my biggest things that works with the couples in codependency that I realize is it's not fair to him for me to have him up on a pedestal that way, because he can't be his full, true, authentic self. Because if he's trying to hold himself to the standards that I see in him, he's not being true to himself either. And that doesn't allow him to grow. And that was a huge lesson for me with the codependency. The other thing is there is the soulmate, which I want to address, very much like a twin flame with a lot less growth. The way I like to think of it as, your best friend for life. It may or may not be a romantic partnership, but it's not one you're rocketing in your growth with. It's the life where you're, enjoying your golden age together, and they can be beautiful, but not if you've hooked on to the growth and loving it. Then even, a soulmate partnership may end up feeling unexciting if you were on a growth partnership or growth trajectory.
One last word about those labels. Just keep in mind they're labels.
Right. Your
Don't
miracles may vary.
begin
Yes.
to draw dividing lines between ourselves with yet more labels. We use them to help us understand ourselves, but we should never then extend that
Or
to
limit it.
become
Right.
divisions between ourselves. That's never the most
I agree.
productive use
And
of labels.
we don't want to limit ourselves by the labels. The biggest reason actually I like to address this, though, is just because when you're dealing with divine union partnerships, twin flames is about 90% of what you'll find out there.
Right. But maybe there's a new type of relationship we haven't even seen yet, and there's going to be a new name for it. I want to be open to being that too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Agreed.
Like, let's not box ourselves in with having to be twin flames the rest of our lives, or anything the rest of our lives other than growing. Now,
I want to address actually what is a very difficult topic in the divine union is the kernel behind it. And I used to think that it was such a corny Hallmark phrase, was the, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it's yours. If it doesn't, it was never meant to be. It's true. We had to face being open, even though I really had no desire to. And it's not that we're going off and doing things, but I don't own him. And if I am going to be my own autonomous sovereign being, so is he. And it doesn't mean that either of us are looking for things, but I've worked through the point where if I were to meet someone who I feel connected to in that way, respect for him, I would let him know, but he wouldn't stop me and I won't stop him. And I know that's it was an incredibly difficult one for me, not because I even had a jealousy issue, because I had a fear of losing him issue. I had my validation issues, my comparing myself to everyone else. Early on, it was well, what does anyone else have that I don't, that isn't good enough? But guess what? It's not that it isn't good enough. It's that we like novelty in our life. We like excitement. And when we meet someone
Plus-
new, if there's that connection and everyone is on the same page, there is open, honest communication. They know we're not looking for other people to, no one is going to steal either of us from the other. And any partners we may have will know that up front. So as long as everyone is emotionally mature and on the same page, it is something that we have reached the point that we are not only comfortable with, but feel that it is vital to the divine union. Whether we ever act on it or not, we don't own each other. And as an autonomous being, that would include relations with other people.
When I was 25, I would have billed myself as a card-carrying atheist. I've come a long way since that time in terms of my belief paradigm and structures. But, even back then, actually, darn it, I forgot where I was going to go with that. But before I forget, I do want to I just want to flesh out something
Sure.
she talked about at the beginning regarding the difference between divine feminine and masculine. Again, and touching on what I just said about labels, we got to be
Right.
careful there even, because the real truth is that none of us, we're not bodies at our core. We're spirit at our core, having a physical experience, but this body is not who I am. Okay. It's not who you are.
Yeah.
You're more than that, much more. So there are divine masculine and divine feminine energies need to be thought of as aspects of
Right.
each one of us. I'm not, just because I have a penis doesn't mean I'm all divine male
Right.
and no divine female.
Because we all have both.
And yes, exactly. We all have both, regardless of physical structure. Physical structure is all part of the illusion. You're not going to learn anything significant from focusing on the illusion, because it's illusion. You need to look at the content, the underlying content to all form. That's the spiritual path is asking us to do in ever more astute fashion, is reading between the lines, not judging books by its cover. I never would have, I don't know how many of you have seen Trena when she started, but back in my ego days, when I thought I had to have, a good-looking girl on my arm to be worth anything in the eyes of my peers and culture, I would never have been able to form the relationship that I had with her. But by the time I was old enough, and
His checklist didn't have physical attributes on it.
Nothing
because he
on the
knew-
checklist had any form to it
Yeah.
at all. It was all about who this person was going to be.
To his
Right?
credit, because that changed everything.
If
Yeah.
I hadn't made the decision to do that, I wouldn't have
Yeah.
all of this. I wouldn't have this magical, mystical, wonderful, ever expanding life. So it's been a huge confirmation and validation for me to see that these spiritual principles that I studied for the last 10 years are all true. They're all coming true. And it's once you begin to even slightly allow in your heart that might be possible, is when
It's
things
amazing.
can really jumping off.
Because
So,
it's divine unions, and I realize we're going through time quick when there's two of us talking.
yeah.
I'm not sure. I always said Merkaba, but I'm reading it, so it might be Merkaba. but it looks like a three-dimensional Jewish star, the Star of David. It is the symbol for the divine union. You have the masculine triangle, which is the wider at the top and the point at the bottom. Many of you that are Wiccan will remember this from all the stuff. And then you have the feminine, which is the wider hips going up to the narrower. They fit together, and it is such a perfect representation for divine union because it will spin effortlessly if they are in balance. But if you're out of balance with each other, it can't travel straight. There's drag in it because of the alignment being, it's like a top where one side is off. Now, what this represents, and we have found to be profound in our own journey, is if you look at it, the narrow end of one is supported by the width of the other. So you realize when, and vice versa.
Where she's strong, I'm weak.
Right.
And instead of treating myself in an egoic manner and saying, I've got to be great at everything,
he lets me support him in the things I'm stronger.
When we need, a feeler on something, I got a girl for that.
Right.
Because she does it better than me. I can do it because I have both aspects within myself. But I know that's why when we drive places, I drive and she navigates.
Right.
So that if I need navigation, I defer to her.
Right. And when I need organization, or I need to figure out the most efficient way to get something done, or to figure out why a mechanic is working a certain way. What is this resistance meaning that I keep hitting? I bring it to him because that's where I am weaker, because I feel, I intuit. So if you need me to tell you steps 1 through 10, I got nothing. So I go to him because that's where I'm weak, but it's where he is very strong.
Another way that is a beautiful way to think about divine union, and specifically with regard to divine masculine and feminine energies, is that I bring and represent the reason aspect of ourselves, right? The thinking mind. That's what the masculine energy represents. Divine feminine brings the heart, the caring, the love. I could not be a loving being without my heart. I would be a robot. So I have divine feminine every bit as much in me as it is in her or any of you. And only by recognizing the strength of both of those aspects and learning how to balance them so that I can call on the proper tool, whether it be a divine feminine tool or a divine masculine tool, I can call on either one equally strong first in myself, and she balances herself first. And then together we come together as sovereign, autonomous beings who together have also recognized that we can do far more
together
combined than we could ever do by ourselves. Neither one of us would even be able to sit here and talk to you guys about any of this stuff if I hadn't had her helping me grow in all the ways. All the ways that I needed to grow are the ways she models beautifully. All the ways she needs to grow are the ways that I demonstrate how it's done. How the balanced version what that looks like, so that she can emulate it, because nobody learns from nobody. You have to learn from role models, right? From mentors, teachers. So she teaches me how to come down, not so to balance my head with my heart, The
divine male, and I want to point this out too, is
and
more
I
prone to
encourage her
rumination,
to get a little head in with the heart once in a while. Think, don't always just heart it up, right? Like there's necessary points in which neither one is worthless.
Right.
God doesn't make junk.
Yeah.
There's no appendix in the universe. Even the appendix once had a purpose. So
that was funny. That was funny. One of the first things, though, couple things I want to hit because I want to make sure I get to them, is when you're going to be in a partnership with someone, it has to be someone you could run a business with. Now, I'm not saying you're going to go run a business like we are. However, your 3D life with somebody is a business.
If you think about family dynamics and budgeting and budgeting for the group, where
Right.
the group's input has to be taken into account and
Or
all of
even
that.
just planning meals and buying grocery, all these things require the ability to work together, to divide up tasks, to delegate. And I'm not saying we came into the relationship with them the same way. We were both really good organizers, horrible at delegating. Both of us were in the, we'll just do it ourselves so it's done right.
Yeah,
Although our rights were very different,
Yeah,
which, you know, made it
which-
entertaining.
yeah.
The second pillar that is really important in order to have a divine union partnership is the intimacy I mentioned. It's again, why it doesn't need to be a romantic partnership is what intimacy means is the ability to be your true authentic self and feel safe doing so. Intimacy is someone who, by their acceptance of you, gives you a safe space, and you, this is the important part, do the same for them. Because the difference between a space holder and an intimate partner really comes down to the space holder. You're not holding space for them. They're holding space for you to work through what you need. An intimate partner, you're holding it for each other and allowing the other person to be their authentic self and grow. And the third, and honestly, I do believe with these three ingredients, any relationship can work, is it has to be someone you can be a friend with. If you were not romantically involved with them, would you still want to hang out with them? Would you still want to do things together? If the answer is no, you're probably not good in a relationship together. And one of the things that he pointed out
Yeah.
earlier. Oh,
Sex and fear of the unknown
yeah,
are terrible cement
Right.
for relationships. And that's
Yeah.
essentially the two pieces which a lot of romantic relationships in our country today rest on.
right. And perceived obligation is probably another one that also keeps
Yeah.
people places they shouldn't be for very long, which segues perfectly into the next thing I was going to say, which builds on something he had said earlier, is everyone that wants to grow needs to set a standard for themselves to not accept a partner that is not willing to grow with you. Now, I'm not saying you're going to be super close in tandem the whole way. We have times now for us, a little bobble off feels like a lot because
Yeah.
we have done so much of our work that even little things can be so we can find them and look at them and clear them. But in the process of doing so, we are doing it to grow so that each of us is the absolute best us we can be. And then we're bringing that best us together to the relationship. But if your partner is not willing to grow with you, there's really nothing you can do for yourself other than set boundaries. And if they don't follow the boundaries, eventually you may have to accept and cut ties.
Well, your choices are rinse and repeat the status quo for the
Right.
remainder of your life. If they're not willing to grow, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
Or move on.
And if you're not willing to grow, what will happen is you will be drifted apart, and then you will meet the same person with a different face, because the universe will keep bringing you the same lessons until we learn them. They may look like different people, but you're going to have the same problem over and over. So really the only sane answer when you realize that is to work on your growth.
That's that trickiness of form I was referring to. Don't be fooled by the form the problem
Yeah.
comes in. Look at the essence of the problem to see what is the real problem you're supposed to be learning about or solving or letting go of, surrendering, whatever the case may be, that it's the essence of the problem, not the form. I don't know why it didn't work with Jack and it didn't work with Bill and it didn't work with Ted, but
It's all them that are worthless.
But this is Tom. He's totally new, but he's doing all the same things that Bill and Jim and Fred did. You know, like you got to look past the form
When you
to the
look
content.
on Facebook, actually, you see proof of it all day long. I would see people say all women are crazy, all men are assholes.
If you
That's
believe
because
that,
they keep
that's
seeing
what you'll get.
it's also because they keep getting the same problem until they work and heal themselves. So guess what? Every woman is crazy to you because you're attracting the crazy ones until you heal the part of yourself that is attracted to crazy.
Yeah, and sadly, it makes it true in their world, because if you think about it, if every woman I met I thought was crazy, and I had dated 5 girls, but they were all crazy, in my opinion.
Right. But what's the common
Then
denominator?
Right. Well, that's then where you start to go, wait a minute,
Right.
how come you always seem to end up with the crazy one,
Mhm.
right? Maybe there's
Something about you that
about
makes you
you
drawn to it.
that makes you drawn to that type of thing.
Yeah. Very often the crazy, because crazy is really not, but it tends to be
I
excitement.
don't like that word. I apologize
I
for
was using it for
it.
the example though, but well, and because that is what is a common thing that you see on Facebook, that people think that women are all crazy. But again, we see what we expect to see. But it's also that if you're attracting a certain energy, it's because it's there to show you what you need to work on in yourself to heal and grow. And for me, if I needed to break my codependency, I was going to keep meeting people that brought that out in me. He did in the beginning, but as I said, the codependency was needed for me to help him through his things, especially the control issues. Because if I wasn't codependent at that point, he wouldn't have been able to work through and let go of his control issues, because I would have been butting up against them the whole time. So it is the step we needed.
A certain level of emotional maturity needs to be
Yes.
present in both partners to make it work. If you're, still at the stage where egoic
Temper tantrums.
tantruming, for lack of a better way to put it, is too either physically destructive or verbally destructive, emotionally destructive.
You're not at a place to do this with a partner yet.
Yeah. You can look around at all the evidence around us as to what that future will hold for you if you don't heal yourself to some degree.
Right.
It doesn't, again, don't think Mount Everest. Think the next boulder. We are never required to be at the top of the mountain or anywhere near it. What we need to do is say to the universe, I'm turning towards it. As soon as you announce that consciously to yourself, good things will start happening,
Right.
because the universe is a mirror. And as soon as you put that energy out, that's what you're going to start getting back. And it's gotten to the point with her and at the level of development we're at, where our days are literally just filled with miraculous things,
and
epiphanies, deep insights.
We have
into-
actually started telepathy. It is awesome and amazing, but I will be in the car and I will suddenly just go, oh, you want Hoppe? And he's like, I was thinking it, but I didn't ask.
That happens probably 5 to 6 times a day now in various different circumstances.
Where I'll just answer something, or he'll start to do something that I was about to ask him to do, things like that, which is really, really exciting.
But you can't have any of that when all of that egoic garbage and
Right.
the barriers and walls and the arsenals of guns pointed out them.
Yeah.
None of that can be there in order for any of that to develop.
We probably should open it to questions
Yes,
soon, but I do
good
want
idea.
to throw in real quick that I had told the story about the walls in my boundary class, that he walked in like he had a key and owned the place as soon as we started talking. What I didn't realize, and I believe that is because of how we are connected and that I manifested him and he manifested me, and that's why this happened. But what I had learned just yesterday was that I still had my walls up for other men. I still had that. It had been framed my whole life that I always had to be on the defense because men were dangerous. And it's not that I don't have men friends, but they were the exceptions, right? The good ones. But I was framing an entire half of reality, an entire part of myself as bad. And I still had those walls. And so that's something on part of the graceful vulnerability. I like to be honest that it's still a challenge I'm working on now, because in the process of us talking about open and everything else, I realized I might decide I want to go do something. And if I do, I'm facing dealing with other men again. And again, not that I don't love men, but I didn't trust them. I had a fear. And I think that is a wound on our entire intuitive side of our society, and will until we stop telling men they're monsters, but how much is it you can't trust yourself, they didn't have control over themselves, and that doesn't help anybody. So I wanted to
There's a
address
give and
that.
take there, because the men also then have to be willing to disarm themselves. I had to defang
Right.
so she could trust being around me wouldn't end up in her being hurt.
Yeah.
You can't have honesty until there's a safety
Feeling. Yeah.
feeling of safety there. And so, yeah.
So I guess
We should,
open
we
it up to
definitely should
questions.
open
We
it up.
went on long today.
that-
So
Yeah. Probably
So-
could be a multi-session thing in the future.
well, actually, and we're doing an intuitive integrator class too, so we can get more
Okay.
into it in that one.
Good.
So, and does anyone have any questions today? And thank you, Stacia. That was very sweet. I don't know if Peter saw it, but
I didn't.
here we go.
I don't
I'll bring
have
it up.
my-
Oh,
I
she-
can read it.
okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh,
So I think,
Thank
so
you.
Stacia had a question in there and so did Ashley. So I just
Oh.
want
Yep,
to make
I
sure
see
that
it.
those were addressed. Definitely great information. Yeah, a lot that I needed to hear as well. So. lots
Yes,
to
twin
reflect
flame
on.
and karmic relationship. I can explain that to answer Ashley's thing real quick. Is again, you don't know which it is until it's over. I mean, honestly, I fully believe we are what most would call twin flame. But you know what? 5 years from now, I could find out it wasn't. It was part of a karmic past. Do I believe that? Not at all, because we make our reality, and this has been amazing. But the karmic partnership, more often, you'll have much more dramatic running and chasing. You will have a lot of issues with one partner that is growing and another that flat out refuses to. Now, there's a difference between I'm
Well-
struggling and you can't put it on someone else that they're not trying to grow because you don't know what they're doing inside. But if they are saying you are crazy, this is bullshit, they're not open to it, at least currently.
My understanding of karmic partner is that it's a relationship that results in growth for both,
Right.
but oftentimes not until they split. The growth occurs after the split.
Right.
Twin flame
Together.
growth together, right?
I guess
So,
probably,
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
what of those characteristics are though, like when you're active in those relationship, you don't know which it is till after you separate.
Are
The
you
growing.
are you having an enjoyable time or not?
There. Okay. And I know I kind of came in late too, so
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, karmic partnerships, the growth occurs afterwards because during the relationship,
You're fighting to build the
busy
shadows.
fighting each other, right? So the growth occurs afterwards. In twin flame relationship, there is some struggle, to be sure.
But there
But
is still growth
The
together.
sense overall is always, this seems to keep getting better and better.
Right.
And that's the difference in my
I can
current
agree.
highest understanding.
thank you very much. That
Mhm.
helped.
There was one from.
Oh.
Yeah, Stacia, did you get your
Oh,
question?
I see it. Yep. Would saying to each. It can be. In fact, though, it was one of the earliest things that happened in our relationship was we both looked at each other and were like, we are not each other's exes. Because it was right after we moved in together and we both It was over something simple like dishes in the sink kind of thing, you know, but we ended up, it was our first time upset with each other. And within about 5 minutes, and maybe this could be part of why we have been able to grow together, is this was long before awakening. And I was like, we are not each other's partner. And I think, you know, our exes, we're not each other's exes. And at that point, we were able to realize where we were putting that and at least be open to making, not projecting that on the other person. Yes.
Yeah, you just helped me click in a huge thing.
Oh, good.
Thank you, because yeah, that was one of our arguments is he looked at me and said, I am not one of your past boyfriends, and I just went livid. And so I was just curious if that was one of your triggers as well.
Yeah, but the thing is your triggers are where you need to look at shadows. In fact,
Not where he needs to be different for
Right.
you. That's a sign of a place. If you're the one getting upset, getting pissed, then that's the flag to look inside yourself with rigorous honesty.
of why it upsets you.
Why is this really upsetting me?
And this is why I love Trena's classes.
Yeah,
Well, thank you. Thank you.
she's pretty
Ashley.
great, isn't she?
Thank you.
Yes,
Shameless
and
plug.
absolutely gorgeous. You're a lucky guy.
Aw. All right, I love you, Stacia. You're good for my ego. On to where you can learn about more about different relationships, soulmates, twin flames. Internet search, there is a lot of crap out there, but there is a particular group called Twin Flame Universe. The people who run it are Sheila and
It's a
Jeff.
Facebook
It's a
group.
Facebook group. In fact, I'll post it in the Woo Academy if people would like. What I can say is their understanding and everything I've read from them is very much like ours, and they have a lot more material out there as far as data. So I wouldn't mind sharing that at all, so you can look it up.
It just got my epiphany back, and I want to
Share with the
real
class?
quick.
Yeah, go for it.
So maybe not.
Oh,
Darn it. This is part and parcel of the growth process at this stage.
because you can't
I
be
know what it
committed to your
was.
memory.
You
Oh,
were saying that we were starting to recognize dynamics, relationship dynamics, even prior
Right.
to what we would term our when we got our bell rung and we
Right.
really got woken up. And what that demonstrates is the principle. It's so important. You cannot just wait for the rest of the world to come around.
yeah.
You have to begin applying these principles. And it's the same with, you can't just sit there, reading books, but never applying any of the principles.
Well, not if
and
you want to
ever
awaken.
expect
Yeah.
to get a tap from the divine. It's not going to happen by them just coming and knocking on your door. You have to turn towards life first. You have to say, I'm ready to do something more, something helpful for not just me, but my community. And that's what I personally believe is what brings it in, what calls it in.
I think a lot of it all comes down to action. I was talking about in my class the other night with you guys where I had said, you move into the state and the world that you want. So if you want to be a healthy person, do the things healthy people do.
Start, not Mount Everest.
Right.
First step.
But that
Start
includes
moving in that direction. Start
Yeah.
showing the universe that you care about yourself, and it will start helping you care ever more effectively.
Now, we do get asked, like when we're talking about couples things, and particularly at expos and stuff, where we have met a lot of single people that go, I'm on the ascension path. How do I find my divine partner? You don't. In fact, particularly not looking for them is how you usually find them. But you have to work and heal yourself to be in a place where you can meet a healed partner. Because if you are unhealed, you will connect and draw in unhealed people. If you are healed, you will draw in a healed partner that you can continue to heal and grow with. Now, I'm not saying you won't still have healing to do, but at a certain point of wounding, all you're going to bring in is the mirrors that are there to help you see it. Now, if you're
You
lucky,
have-
you can both heal together,
But you have to, I personally believe you have to have at least gotten to the point where you're turning towards life. You're recognizing that there's 8 million different more things that you could be doing as an announcement of life to be thriving. And yes, we're not doing, it's not about doing either.
although this he chafes him a little.
Yeah, that's been a big mountain for me to climb, is slowing the fuck way down. That's been a big key to helping me open things up. But where that factors into the partner that you're looking for, if you're looking for one, is as mind-numbingly
Frustrating for
irritating
you.
as this is going to be, stop looking.
Yeah.
I had stopped looking and was on my way out.
And
it was
same, I
only
wasn't
be-
looking, I was married and just had
Waiting
resigned
to
myself to
die.
die there. Yeah.
Neither one of us was looking. We could not have found each other if we were looking for one another, because every gift I've ever been given by the divine has always hit me like this, sucker punched me every time. I've never just seen it
Planned
coming and been like, yes, here it is. All right,
Right.
good, perfect, just the way I asked for it and everything. It always blindsides you anyway. So our best advice is, we already talked about the fact that the basis for a really solid relationship begins with friendship. Friendships form around common passions.
Right.
So the things that if you're an artist, get on Facebook groups where they're talking about art and meet a guy there, because
We met on
you
Star
at
Wars:
least-
The Old Republic.
Exactly. We were video gamers. We played video games. And I used to play hundreds of hours of video games at the time I met her. And but because we had so much in common, it gave us both a better chance of having other things that were in common, but also it didn't immediately lead to the place where most relationships go, which is, within a reasonably short period of time, sometimes a few years, you're realizing that you never really did have that
Right.
much in common, and that mostly it was just about, you were lonely, she
Yeah.
was hot, and
And she put out.
and she actually said yes. So I'm gonna try and shoehorn this into a relationship
Right.
that I'm gonna make it work for the rest of my life.
The ironic side of that is, for women, how much do we go, you know what? At least he doesn't hit me. Or
That goes back to the compromise piece.
Yeah.
Don't you dare ever compromise, or you won't get it, because if you're compromising, you're getting something less than your perfect thing. Because
And
if
you
you
won't
get
be
your
happy.
perfect thing, it will not feel like a compromise.
Right.
It'll feel like checking all the boxes on your checklist, plus a few that you didn't even know existed.
But taking the advice he just gave, if you are looking for someone, the place to do it is not, Tinder or
The bar,
the bar, or unless your passion is drinking, which will go with
Yes.
Stacia's thing. Yes,
Exactly.
quit drinking, quit numbing yourself. That is completely true. We self-medicate in order to get through how painful autopilot can be. So back to the conscious living class that I had done, you don't feel the need to numb it out when you're consciously enjoying life. But I can definitely agree with what
the
you said.
universe is just a big mirror. Remember that. So if all day long you're saying to yourself, I'm lonely, I wish I had somebody, what is the message you're sending the universe?
I'm lonely.
Keep me lonely. I'm lonely. Show me loneliness. For 1,000, Alex.
Yeah. It really is how you perceive yourself. And, when I thought of I had a moment tonight. Actually, we went to Trader Joe's and this really sweet little old lady told me how fit I looked. I have never been called fit in my entire life
She was talking about it the whole way out of the grocery store.
because it
I've
was
never been
so
called
novel
fit.
to me. And that's the thing is I had still with losing all the weight, but I have extra skin, right? I still thought of myself as a big person and I'm not anymore. But as long as I was still thinking of myself that way, I am still subjecting myself to the negative self-talk that goes with it.
In her universe, she still is. In her
Right.
reality, she still was until she got snapped
Jolted,
out of
right?
it and realized that's not who she is anymore.
Right. So I need to let that go. So any other questions? We talked a lot tonight.
Yeah.
This is great, always such a delight and eye-opening. You know, there's always, I'm keeping notes as I'm going. I've learned that I get my ahas during the middle of everything. So I'm like, I've started like taking notes, writing down my epiphanies. And yeah, totally appreciate everything that the both of you have shared tonight.
Thank you,
Yes,
Ashley.
thank you. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Does anybody have questions, comments, anything else that they want to share for tonight? I appreciate how articulate the two of you are, being able to put together and formulate. I know you guys, your journey, like a year and a half, like
About a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so powerful. So much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording and we'll see everybody next week.
Great.
Same channel.
Do you know what my topic is next week?
That is I don't.
I'll look it up.
It
It's
was in
fine.
my head a minute ago. I don't remember
Yeah,
right
she
now.
doesn't
I have
either.
no idea.
I'm gonna stop recording.
The flyer, I remember